Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tabletop Tavern Tips. It's been a little bit since we did one of these, but right now I'm exhibiting my favorite traits of tired and hungry and decided that now is the perfect time to be recording a Dungeons & Dragons video. My logic is truly impeccable. But yeah, today, I think you guys have seen the title, we're doing another red flags video. It's been a hot minute since we did anything regarding D&D red flags, or, well, generally tabletop gaming red flags, but I figured today is the day that we come back to the topic. It's really important on this channel to look at red flags and prevent horror stories before they start, but today we might find some red flags that we disagree with, perhaps? Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, first up, here we have an interesting one. Certain alignments. Alignments in general, actually. Alignment is a fascinating thing in the D&D community. It's actually pretty controversial, surprisingly. In my opinion, I don't really see alignment as a big deal. I view alignment the same way I view personality tests, or star signs, or Hogwarts houses. We, as human beings, like grouping people into categories. It's something that we do a lot more than you might expect, and alignments are just another symptom of that. I mean, God, how many videos are there of people just putting characters from TV shows, movies, video games, etc. into certain alignments? There are so many, and for a good reason. People do enjoy alignments, and I don't think that that's a red flag necessarily. However, unlike Hogwarts houses or star signs, there are definitely alignments that are naturally just straight up evil. I mean, that's literally a third of the point. There are 3 evil alignments where the point is that characters in these categories harm other people because they're bad. They're evil. And that means that there are definitely games where characters of those evil alignments aren't going to fit. However, I think generally the major red flag that I think this should be rephrased to is alignments that don't fit the campaign, or more specifically, alignments that cause conflict. It's not necessarily the alignment that's the problem, it's the fact that sometimes players can use alignment as an excuse to cause unnecessary conflict in the party. Now, conflict in the party can be really cool. We've seen it work many times, but there are also times where it can be really disruptive and unfun to have an evil character disrupting every single adventure a good aligned party is trying to go on, or having a goody two-shoes paladin in a predominantly evil campaign with a DM creating a League of Supervillains style story. Those things are just not going to work. You need to create a party that is at least somewhat cohesive. You're not going to get along all the time. Conflict can be interesting. However, having a party that are going to be at each other's throats, well, that can be really problematic unless you specifically try to go for that. That's where I think the issue with alignment lies. Though alignment in general, I don't really think that's a red flag. Players trying violence as the first possible solution to every problem. Now, I do think there are certain games where this will work. In my game, often the solution is to just win the fight. And that's okay. That's the kind of game I run. That's the kind of game my players expect. However, not every problem is solved with swords, even in a game like mine. I do think players with absolutely no mind for complexity beyond just kill the thing, that is definitely a problem for a lot of DMs out there. Sometimes DMs will create complex situations where the intent is that the players will roleplay, but instead, if the players just kill their way through, it kind of takes the buzz out of the whole situation. As a dungeon master, we often get really excited and hyped to interact with our players as our NPCs, as our characters. It can build some really interesting and fun roleplay moments that we enjoy just as much as the players. But when the players just jump to kill everything, it can kind of ruin those moments because, yeah, sometimes combat isn't as fun as actually talking things out in character. And that's why, yeah, this is a red flag. We're looking at essentially murder hobos and instigators, characters and players, more specifically players really, that go out of their way to find combat in everything. And yeah, in some games, that's gonna work. However, in many games, that's not going to work. Many games put role-playing and solving things without violence in a front and center position, even if, especially in Dungeons & Dragons, combat is going to be prominent. You don't want players that kill all of your major quest hook NPCs just for the lulz, because that's just going to make your game as a DM all the more frustrating to run. DMs who write a story for the players to play through without providing any actual choices or motives for the players. Now this is interesting, kind of counteractive to the point we just made. We just talked about players completely destroying the plot and fun of the Dungeon Master by murdering their way through the game. Here we have the opposite end, where a DM is so rigidly tied to their plot that they don't let the players make any choices. This is a major issue for a lot of games and a lot of players who want that more freedom of choice. I do want to acknowledge something though, and this is actually pointed out in the comment section of this very post. Sometimes a linear campaign is exactly what the players want. I myself run pretty linear games sometimes, especially my actual play mini campaigns. Because the campaigns are on YouTube and because the stories need to naturally be kind of short, I have to sort of direct the players a lot. I don't drop them into a sandbox because that would be too unpredictable. Sessions would get overly long and a pain to edit, and therefore I have to run a more linear game. It's also a game I'm pretty comfortable with running. My home games are not actual plays. They're not published on YouTube at all, but even those games are more linear, not because I want it, but also because my players enjoy that kind of game. They're not the sandbox style party. I give them lots of choices, but I don't drop them into an open world where they can just go wherever they want. They have goals given by NPCs and quest hooks. Linear games are not bad by any means. In fact, I actually go out on a limb and say that most new DMs will gravitate towards this rather than open sandbox. I have generally found that linear games are easier for me to run. Though then again, they are also what I'm used to, so maybe I'm a little bit biased there. However, even I, as a linear DM, have to say that rigidly attaching players to a plot and never letting them deviate, that is a major problem. They may be more Mass Effect style with 2 branching pathways, for example, but those are still choices. When a DM is super railroady, that means that player actions don't matter no matter what. We saw in an RPG horror story once players using talents that their characters have to avoid situations, to avoid combat situations more specifically, and the DM just didn't let it work because he wanted that combat to happen. That's lame. That's super lame, in fact. The players were being intelligent. They were using their wits to combat the situation without combat. And the DM just said no, which is lame. There are definitely times where a DM should say no, like boundary crossing, but players being smart, yeah, that's not exactly the kind of thing you'll want to veto, and that's where the red flag comes in. DMs that say no when their players are doing something smart, something intelligent, something that builds up the plot further, that's where our issue lies. Player to player, hoarding some loot that the DM quite obviously gave out to divide to specific players in-game for character building. That is now ruined because one player just had to have all the loot. Oh boy, thank God I've never had to deal with this. I definitely give out loot specifically meant for certain player characters. Right now, my players are pursuing a set of legendary items, and yeah, each legendary is meant for a specific player character. If one player character hoarded all the legendaries, well, first and foremost, they probably wouldn't be able to use them because they're meant for specific characters and tied to the mechanics of their classes, but also because it would be greedy, it would be lame. And we have seen this before. Loot ninjas, straight out of World of Warcraft, are a thing in Dungeons & Dragons. I'd actually wager to say that they probably existed in Dungeons & Dragons before World of Warcraft, given that one definitely came before the other. But anyway, the point is, yeah, definitely a red flag. The moment I notice something like this, it's gonna be a problem. Look, sometimes players are gonna argue about loot. In fact, 99% of the arguments my players have are about loot, but it's all in good fun. At the end of the day, the players are working together as a party, and it is mutually beneficial for everyone to have items that benefit their player characters. However, somebody hoarding the loot, intentionally being greedy and not allowing other people to take items just because I found it first, well, yeah, not fun. Personally, I really think this is kind of ridiculous because I, as a DM and as a player, like seeing other players get items that benefit their characters. It's just really fun and cool. In my opinion, I feel like the party and the DM should be fans of each other's work. Players should be fans of other players' characters because we're all working together to create this story and because other people's characters can be really freaking cool. And seeing those characters that you also like getting items that benefit them, that make them all the cooler, I think that's really awesome. So having a loot ninja steal away all those items just because it's mine and it should be mine because I found it first, or something along those lines, yeah, definitely ruins the fun for a lot of people. It's a red flag to watch out for, a red flag that signals selfishness. In a group dynamic, that is one of the worst traits you could possibly have. Player character, if they have a homebrew class and won't accept critique or the need to change anything. If their background makes them a Gary/Mary Sue. If they are a control freak who doesn't take other players' needs into consideration. The homebrew class thing has come up sparingly in comparison to the other two, so let's focus in on that for a second. Homebrew classes can be really fun. In fact, every single player character in my home game uses a homebrew spec, a specialization, a subclass. None of them are from an official D&D book, and honestly, it's made the game all the more fun. Are there some balance issues? Yes, there have been some balance issues. Some major balance issues. But my party acknowledges the need for balance and accept my patch notes when they come through. We do have discussions, open discussions about what needs changing and what doesn't make much sense in the homebrew because some of them are kind of poorly written, so we need to rewrite them ourselves. However, my players are willing to accept the need for at least a little bit of game balance. If the players were running their way through all my combats easily, it's not much fun. In fact, the reason they know that is because the sessions where they have the least amount of fun are the sessions where they just roll through everything really easily. They like the challenge that my fights present. If you've watched any of my games, you know that I love an intense combat. And yeah, having a super broken ability would kind of ruin that, especially if it comes from a homebrew subclass. A player being completely unwilling to accept any sort of discussion of that nature would be a red flag for me. In fact, I've seen multiple YouTube comments about this, calling me lame or a buzzkill for even discussing the idea of combat balance, which, look, I get it. Combat balance isn't going to belong in every game, but it's important in my games, combat-heavy games, where the difficulty is the allure, you know? So, yeah, definitely a red flag that I agree with. As for the Gary/Mary Sue, as well as the main focus thing, yeah, those things are also really bad. Again, like we said many times, this is a team dynamic that needs to be maintained, and having one main character is, yeah, not great. Of course, I will clarify by saying that having a particular focus during a certain arc, that's not a bad thing. Matt Mercer isn't committing some crime by having the campaign focus on Ford when Ford's story is front and center. That makes sense. But the important distinction is, one, it's temporary, and two, the other player characters are still relevant. When Ford was dealing with all his stuff with Ukatoa and the Wild Mother, the other members of the Mighty Nine were still a part of that story. They were in a little bit more of a backseat role, but I wouldn't say that they faded into the background by any means. Ford was the focus, but the other players still absolutely mattered. Back to the main issue though, if you have a player who actively wants that kind of spotlight, who goes out of their way to get it and steal it from other people, well, yeah, that's a red flag that needs to be dealt with swiftly. Either by a discussion, or if that doesn't work, maybe by a kick. Plot. So I went to the comments and responses of this post to get a little bit more context because I can't imagine somebody genuinely saying plot is a red flag for a dungeon master. A DM writing out any sort of framework for their plot is a red flag? Yeah, that doesn't make much sense to me. However, this poster was absolutely 100% genuine, and I gotta say I disagree. Now look, I think sandbox games are really cool, but they're not my style, and that's okay. Two different people can play two different games in two different places, and that is great. However, I think that this poster actually exhibits a different red flag. This guy was arguing with a bunch of people in the comments saying that any sort of plot framework is terrible for D&D, and that sandbox is the best way to play, bar none. And yeah, some people are going to prefer sandbox, and some people are going to prefer linear. That's okay. But the important thing is that we acknowledge that different people play differently. The red flag for me, the real red flag, is being unable to acknowledge that different people play different games. D&D and tabletop in general are so varied. Not only do we have different styles of play, but we have entirely different games. And that is what makes this industry so awesome and amazing. The amount of different ideas on display is staggering to somebody entering into the space. And while, yeah, sometimes it can be overwhelming, I think that's part of the beauty of it. The amount of people who play their own separate thing in their own separate tables, great. However, there are a lot of people out there who kind of implicitly don't like that, who will go out of their way to condemn certain playstyles. And while yes, there are definitely people who can be harmful in this industry, I don't think we should write off any sort of plot-driven campaign as a red flag or as a bad D&D or tabletop game. Again, I'm not trying to say Sandbox is bad either. Sandbox is great. It's just different. We play different games. They're both really good. I mean, look, to be fair to this guy, saying plot as a red flag does expose a red flag, just not the one that this guy thought he was exposing. Alright, here's the last one. Players getting drunk or high while playing and no longer being able to play quickly or skillfully. Now, I actually want to talk about this one last because this is something that actually affects my games sometimes. Me and my players sometimes use some illicit substances, and by that I mean we drink a little bit. And a little bit is the main key. I don't know if you've heard Cody Coast's newest song, Moderation, but yeah, moderation is key when drinking and Dungeons and Dragonsing. Yeah, sometimes a super off-the-rock, tipsy game will be fun, but normally you need at least a degree of focus. The reason I take a little bit of delicious health drink before D&D is because sometimes I could be a bit of a hard ass, especially late at night when I play, and I want to loosen up a little bit. I don't want to be such a stickler when I'm trying to have fun with my friends. So yeah, a little bit is always great. The same thing goes for a lot of my friends who drink a little bit to keep themselves loose during the game and have a little bit more fun. That's our style, and that's not bad, but if we were to go heavy on that sort of behavior, it would be bad. It would quickly turn bad. We all understand that. Again, moderation is the key. This has been a theme in all of my games, even the APs. However, you wouldn't notice because, again, we use this neat thing called moderation. Behavior can get out of hand, and sometimes control is necessary when playing. So yeah, keep things in moderation, and yeah, I think you're gonna have a much better time rolling dice at the table. Whew, that was quite a bit of red flags. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been a while since we've done one of the Tabletop Tavern tips videos, but we are back! And I am actually pretty happy to be back here on the set. It does feel good. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Q&Play series. We're going to have another Q&A this very week, so there's a community post on the channel if you want to leave your own questions. The whole series is linked in the cards, and while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories, thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment moderation to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.